the source.
In the 30 seconds before Liam McClellan's fangs reached Ania Frey's throat, the entire vampire aristocracy of New Orleans had no idea they were about to hear a name that hadn't been spoken in 3,000 years. They had no escape route, no contingency, and only one truth left. They were never the apex predators. This is the moment-by-moment breakdown of how immortal confidence shattered. If you want to see what happens when gods realize they're just children playing dress-up, subscribe now. Hit like if you've ever wanted to watch arrogance collapse in real time. Drop a comment with the oldest creature you think could still inspire terror. The ballroom exists 6 stories beneath Bourbon Street, carved from limestone that remembers when this city was swamp and fever. No sunlight has touched these walls in 2 centuries. The air tastes like old copper and funeral lilies, thick enough to coat the back of the throat. Chandeliers drip with crystal that catches no warmth, only the blue-white glow of things that stopped living before electricity was invented. Ania stands in the center of the marble floor. Her dress is cotton, $20 from a thrift rack, already soaked through at the small of her back. Around her, arranged on velvet furniture that costs more than most houses, sit 5 figures whose skin has the translucence of deep-sea creatures. They haven't blinked in 4 minutes. Liam McClellan crosses his legs, and his Italian leather shoe makes no sound against stone. They brought her down the service elevator, the one that smells like bleach and something older. Jacoby Tillman held her left arm. His fingers were cold enough to ache where they pressed against her pulse point. He kept his thumb there the entire descent, feeling the rhythm like someone counting money. The doors opened onto a corridor, lined with portraits in gilt frames. Every face in the paintings had the same waxen quality, the same subtle wrongness in the eyes. Ania's sneakers squeaked against polished floors. The sound echoed wrong, swallowed too quickly by air that felt pressurized. Mason Cochran waited at the ballroom entrance, her gown a spill of black silk that pooled at her feet. She smiled without separating her lips. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. The court has been waiting. The ballroom opened before them like a throat. Ania's breath came shallow. The temperature dropped 15 degrees past the threshold. Her skin prickled, every fine hair standing vertical. She could see her exhale, a small cloud that hung in the air longer than physics allowed. They walked her to the center. Her shoes stuck slightly to the floor with each step. Old blood, maybe. Or something that used to be blood before time and air turned it to amber. Liam sat in the largest chair, positioned on a raised dais that added 2 feet to his height. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, the kind of precise wealth that whispers instead of shouts. His hair caught the chandelier light in silver threads. When he looked at her, his pupils were so dilated, the blue of his irises had nearly vanished. "Tethered," he said. The word sounded like a diagnosis. Caden Paris laughed from his position near the bar. The sound had no breath behind it. A recording of laughter played through a speaker. He lifted a crystal glass filled with something too dark to be wine, too thick to be anything but what it was. "She's shaking," Eliana Thibodeau observed. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, chin resting on interlaced fingers. "Like a rabbit." Ania's hands were steady at her sides. Her pulse was elevated, but controlled. 78 beats per minute. She counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4. The rhythm of something waiting. Liam stood. The movement was too smooth, lacking the small adjustments a living spine requires. He descended the dais in 3 steps that made no sound. When he stopped in front of her, she could smell earth and iron and something floral that had rotted into sweetness Do you know what you're here for? His voice was careful, almost gentle. She met his eyes, held them. Yes. The single syllable landed in the room like a stone in still water. Liam circled her, one full rotation, close enough that his sleeve brushed her shoulder. The fabric was cold. Everything here was cold, except her. Lovely, he said to no one in particular. Still warm. Jacoby moved to the bar, poured himself a measure of amber liquid that wasn't bourbon. It left a residue on the glass, thicker than alcohol. He swirled it twice before drinking. His throat didn't move when he swallowed. They're always warm at first, Mason said. She hadn't moved from her position near the door. It's the heat that makes them think they matter. Ania's jaw tightened. A muscle jumped beneath her ear. Liam saw it. His smile widened enough to show the edge of something sharp. You're afraid. Not a question. A confirmation he believed completely. She said nothing. He leaned closer, his breath a cool drift across her cheekbone. She could see the grain of his skin up close, the way it had the texture of old parchment. No pores, no oil, no life happening beneath the surface. Your pulse is racing. He tilted his head, listening to something only he could hear. 120 now. Your heart is trying to climb out of your chest. It wasn't. 82 beats per minute. She counted. Eliana stood, her movements liquid, too fluid for joints and ligaments. She approached from the left, her gown trailing. When she reached Ania, she lifted one pale hand and touched Ania's collarbone. The contact burned with cold. Soft, Eliana murmured. Still so soft. Ania's skin tightened where the fingers rested. Her collarbone ached, the bone itself reacting to proximity with something fundamentally wrong. Should we draw it out? Caden called from across the room. Make an evening of it? No. Liam's voice was final. I'm hungry, and she's ordinary. He circled back to face her. His hand came up, fingers extending toward her throat. She watched them approach, watched the way his nails had been filed to points, the way the tendon in his wrist stood out sharp beneath translucent skin. Any last words? He smiled. Any prayers to gods who abandoned you? The room held its breath. Even the dead things waited. Ania's lips parted. She didn't speak yet. Just breathed. In through the nose, out through barely parted lips. Her exhale misted in the frigid air, hung between them like a veil. Liam's hand hovered an inch from her throat. Waiting. Savoring. They always beg at the end, Jacoby said. He'd moved closer, glass still in hand. Even the ones who think they're brave. It's the survival instinct. Mason's voice came from behind Ania now. They'd boxed her in without seeming to move, a formation practiced over decades or centuries. The body betrays the mind. Ania's body stood perfectly still. Her weight was balanced, centered. Her hands hung loose. No tremor. No shift. Liam noticed. His eyes narrowed by a fraction. You're very composed. He said it like an accusation. For someone about to die. Maybe she's in shock, Eliana suggested. She'd drifted to Ania's right, completing the circle. The mind shuts down when trauma exceeds capacity. Or maybe, Caden pushed off from the bar, approached with the lazy confidence of something that had never encountered resistance. She's stupid. Laughter rippled through the room, that dry, breathless sound. Liam's fingers made contact, 5 points of ice against her throat. Her pulse beat against his palm, strong and steady. He felt it. She watched his expression shift by micro-degrees, confusion bleeding into the certainty. Your heart, he said slowly. It's not what you expected. Ania's voice was quiet, calm. the voice of someone stating a fact, not asking a question. His grip tightened, not enough to bruise yet, but enough to assert, to remind her who held whom. Enlighten me. The smile was gone now. What should I expect from livestock? She didn't flinch at the word, didn't react at all, just held his gaze, her brown eyes flat and depthless in the chandelier light. You should expect, she said, each word carefully spaced, to be very careful about what you do next. The room went silent. True silence, the kind that has weight. Jacoby's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Mason's head tilted, bird-like and predatory. Eliana's smile froze, showing too many teeth. Liam's hand twitched against her throat. Are you threatening me? No. Ania's pulse remained steady under his palm. 85 beats per minute. I'm warning you. This is where it starts to unravel. Subscribe, because what Liam doesn't know yet will destroy him. Like this if you're feeling that first shiver of wrongness. Liam's fingers pressed harder. Ania's windpipe compressed under the pressure. Her face should have flushed, eyes watering, hands clawing at his wrist. Basic physiology. Basic survival response. She just looked at him. You think this is a negotiation? His voice dropped lower, a sound like grinding stone. You think your compliance buys you mercy? I think, she said, and her voice came out clear despite the constriction. You don't know what I am. Mason moved fast, crossing the space in a blur that left after images. She stopped inches from Ania's back, her mouth near Ania's ear. You're meat. She breathed the words against Ania's skin. Warm. Temporary. Hours. Ania's eyes never left Liam's face. No. The single syllable hit different than before. It resonated. The crystal chandelier chimed softly, a sympathetic vibration. Liam's hand spasmed. He pulled it back, staring at his own palm like it had betrayed him. The skin where he'd touched her throat was pink, not burned, not blistered, but pink. Warm. He curled his fingers into a fist. What did you do? Nothing yet. Ania rolled her shoulders, a small adjustment that looked like relief, but read as readiness. But you should step back. Should I? Liam's fangs extended fully now, 2 ivory needles that caught the light. Should I step back from my own court, in my own domain, from my own meal? Yes, Eliana laughed, high and brittle. Oh, this one thinks she's special. Caden drained his glass, set it down on a side table with a clink that echoed. They all think they're special, until we prove otherwise. Jacoby circled around to Ania's left, completing a new formation. Tighter now, close enough that she could smell the earth on all of them, the grave dirt that clung despite the expensive clothes and ancient jewelry. Tell me. Liam leaned in again, but didn't touch. What makes you different from the 100 others we've drained in this room? Ania's chin lifted 1 degree. I was sent. The words landed wrong, landed heavy. Mason's smile faltered. Jacoby stopped moving mid-step. Eliana's head snapped toward Liam, something passing between them that looked almost like concern. Sent. Liam tasted the word. By whom? Ania's lips curved. Not a smile. Something else. You'll find out. The temperature in the room dropped another 5 degrees. Frost began creeping across the surface of the mirrors, delicate fractals that grew too fast, too purposeful. Liam's patience cracked. He grabbed her arm, his grip hard enough that bone ground against bone, lifted her onto her toes. You will tell me now, or I will make your death last days. Her arm stayed loose in his grip, No resistance, no fight, just wait. You can't. Her voice was almost gentle. You can't make me do anything. His other hand came up, fist closing around her throat properly now, cutting off air, cutting off blood flow. Her face should have gone red, then purple, should have swelled. Her expression didn't change. 30 seconds passed. 40. A minute. She didn't gasp, didn't struggle. Just watched him with those flat, endless eyes. Liam released her like she'd burned him again. Stumbled back 2 steps. His hands shook. What are you? Mason and Eliana exchanged a glance. Jacoby had gone completely still, not even bothering to pretend to breathe anymore. Caden broke first. He rushed her from behind, arms wrapping around her torso, fangs aimed at the junction of her neck and shoulder. The killing bite. The one that severs everything important. His teeth met her skin. There was a sound, not loud, a whisper of a sound, like wind through a crack in a tomb. Caden screamed. He released her, staggered back. Both hands clapped over his mouth. Blood ran between his fingers. His blood. Black and old and thick. When he pulled his hands away, his fangs were gone. Snapped off at the root, the jagged stumps weeping darkness. He fell to his knees. The pain bent him double. Forehead pressed to the cold marble. Ania turned to face him. No marks on her skin, no puncture, no bruise. I told you to be careful. Liam's face had gone rigid. The predatory confidence was fracturing, cracks showing in the foundation. You're protected. He said it slowly, working through the implications. Someone claimed you. Put a ward. Yes. Who? His voice was barely controlled. What vampire has the audacity to mark food in my territory? Ania's head tilted. A small gesture, almost pitying. Not a vampire. The words hung in the air. Eliana took an involuntary step back. Mason's hand went to her throat, an unconscious gesture of protection. Jacoby spoke for the first time in 5 minutes, his voice careful and cold. Then what? Ania looked at each of them in turn. Liam, Mason, Eliana, Jacoby. Finally, Caden, still kneeling, still bleeding. The source. Silence. Total. Absolute. Then Liam laughed. It sounded wrong, forced air through a throat that didn't need breath. The source is a myth, a story we tell fledglings to keep them obedient. Is it? Ania's tone suggested she already knew his answer was wrong. Mason had gone pale, which shouldn't have been possible for something already the color of alabaster. Her voice came out thin. The source hasn't manifested in 3,000 years. If it ever existed. It exists. Ania's certainty filled the room. It's always existed. You just forgot what it feels like to be seen by it. Eliana shook her head, too fast, the movement jerky. No, you're lying. You're human. You smell human. You bleed human. I am human. Ania took a single step forward. Everyone except Liam flinched back. But I was chosen, sent, given a name to carry. Liam's jaw clenched. The muscle jumped beneath skin that had been beautiful once, before death preserved it in this uncanny valley. Names are power. His voice was flat. But you're bluffing. No human could carry. Want to test that theory? Ania interrupted. Or do you want to walk away while you still can? His pride wouldn't let him back down. 3 centuries of absolute dominance, of being apex, of answering to nothing. It was locked in his bones, fused to his identity. Say it then. He spread his arms wide. theatrical. "Say this name that's supposed to terrify me." The others shifted. Jacoby moved toward the door, a slow drift he probably thought looked casual. Mason's hands were shaking. Ania's expression went soft. Almost said, "You won't survive it." "Say it." Each word bit off sharp. She took a breath. A real breath. Deep and human and alive. Let it out slow. Last chance. "Say it." Everything changes in the next 60 seconds. Subscribe so you don't miss the moment 3 millennia of arrogance ends. Like if you can feel the trap closing. The name began as a vibration. Sub-audible. Felt in the sternum and the base of the skull before it resolved into sound. Ania's lips moved, shaping syllables that predated language, that existed before humans had words for the things they feared in the dark. The first consonant landed like a hammer. Every piece of crystal in the room shattered simultaneously. Chandeliers exploded into glittering rain. Glasses burst on tables. The mirrors spiderwebbed, then fell away in curtains of silver. Liam's hands flew to his ears. Too late. The sound was inside already, vibrating in the hollows of his bones. The second syllable was worse. Mason dropped to her knees, mouth open in a silent scream. Her eyes rolled back, showing only whites. Eliana collapsed against the wall, sliding down, her fingers clawing at her own face like she could dig the sound out through skin. Jacoby made it to the door, got his hands on the handle. The metal burned his palms, searing flesh that hadn't felt heat in centuries. He held on anyway, yanked. The door wouldn't open. Caden was screaming again. Or still. The sound continuous, wordless, the kind of sound that comes from a place beyond pain. The third syllable broke something fundamental. Liam fell. Just folded, legs giving out, collapsing in a heap of expensive suit and ancient bones. His mouth was open, fangs fully extended, but no sound came out. His hand scrabbled at the marble, leaving long scratches. The shadows in the room detached from the walls, pulled free like living things, pooling on the floor, rising into shapes that almost, but not quite, resembled human forms. They bowed. All of them, in perfect unison, bent at the waist toward Ania. She finished the name. The final syllable was almost gentle, almost a whisper, but it contained within it the weight of every grave ever dug, every corpse ever buried, every undead thing that walked at the sufferance of something older. The silence that followed was absolute. Liam looked up from the floor. Blood ran from his ears, black and viscous. His eyes were red, the whites gone completely crimson. "No," the word barely a breath. "No, that's not. It can't." "It is." Ania looked down at him. No anger, no satisfaction. Just fact. "And you knew. Somewhere deep, where you bury the truths you can't afford, you always knew." His body was shaking. All of them were shaking. The tremors violent enough to rattle teeth that didn't need to be there. Mason's voice came out cracked, broken. "We're the chosen. We're immortal. We're on loan," Ania finished. "You're on loan. The power you carry, the strength, the speed, the hunger, none of it is yours. It was never yours." Eliana had curled into a ball against the wall, arms wrapped around her knees, rocking. A continuous whimper leaked from her throat. Jacoby still stood by the door, frozen, his burned hands hanging at his sides. "If that's true, if the source is real, then why did it let us? Why didn't it?" "Because you were useful." Ania's voice was patient. "Your kind served a purpose, culling, balance, fear, but you forgot what you were. Started to believe your own myth. Liam pushed himself to his knees. The movement took effort, like his body was suddenly too heavy for his strength to manage. What do you want? The arrogance was gone. What remained was older. Rover. Why are you here? To remind you. Ania stepped closer. He didn't try to move away. To show you what happens when you forget your place in the order. Are you here to destroy us? No. She crouched down, bringing herself to eye level. I'm here to correct you. The source doesn't waste resources. But if you continue as you are, thinking yourselves gods, taking without restraint, forgetting the rules, then yes, destruction. Caden had gone silent. He sat slumped against a pillar, his ruined mouth hanging open. Black blood pooled in his lap. What are the rules? Jacoby's voice was small, childlike. Ania stood. You feed. You don't play. You don't make courts and thrones and pretend immortality makes you royalty. You exist in the margins, in shadow, in service to the balance, and you never, ever forget what made you. She turned, walking toward the door. The shadows parted for her, bowing again as she passed. At the threshold, she stopped, looked back. The source is watching now. It will always be watching. If I have to come back. She didn't finish. Didn't need to. The door opened under her hand. No resistance. No burn. She walked through into the corridor beyond. The door closed behind her with a sound like a coffin lid settling into place. For 5 full minutes, no one moved. Liam stayed on his knees, staring at the space where she'd stood. His hands pressed flat against the marble, fingers splayed. His breathing had started again, involuntary. The body responding to a panic so deep it overrode centuries of learned stillness. Mason was crying. Tears ran down her face, pink-tinged, cutting tracks through powder that no longer disguised the truth of what she was. Eliana had stopped rocking. She sat with her back to the wall, head tilted up, staring at the ceiling. Her lips moved, forming words without sound. Jacoby slid down the door until he sat, knees drawn up. His burned hands rested palm up on his thighs, the flesh already beginning to heal, but slowly. Too slowly. Caden hadn't moved, might never move again. She's gone. Jacoby's voice broke the silence. We could hunt her, find her, make her pay for— Shut up. Liam's voice was hoarse, raw. Shut up and think about what just happened. She used a name, some kind of weapon, ancient magic, or it wasn't magic. Liam pushed himself to his feet. His legs shook. He had to brace against the dais to stay upright. It was recognition. Mason wiped her face with shaking hands. Recognition of what? Of what we are. Liam's voice was hollow. Of what we've always been. We're not the top of the food chain. We never were. Eliana's laugh was broken glass. Then what are we? Liam looked at his court, his domain, his kingdom of cold stone and colder flesh. Middle management. The words hung there. No one argued. The source. Mason's voice was small. If it's real, if it's been watching, then everything we've done was permitted, Liam finished. Until now. Jacoby's hands curled into fists, the burned flesh cracking. What do we do? Liam walked to the center of the room where Ania had stood, looked down at the floor. There was no mark, no sign she'd been there at all, except for the shattered crystal and the broken monsters surrounding the empty space. We follow the rules, he said quietly. We feed. We survive. We remember. Remember what? Eliana's voice was barely audible. That we exist because something allows us to exist, and that something can take it away. He looked up at what remained of his court. We've been given a warning. There won't be another. They didn't speak of it again. Not directly. But everything changed. The court dissolved. No ceremony. No announcement. They simply stopped gathering, stopped performing immortality for each other. The ballroom remained empty, the door locked, the service elevator disabled. Liam left New Orleans. He was seen later in smaller towns, hunting alone, taking only what he needed. Never lingering. Never building. The arrogance that had defined 3 centuries bled out of him like an infection finally lanced. Mason and Eliana separated. Last anyone heard, Mason was in Montana, working nights at a blood bank. Eliana disappeared entirely. Jacoby returned to the work he'd done before Liam's court. Disposal. The bodies that couldn't be explained. The evidence that couldn't exist. Necessary. Invisible. Service. Caden's fangs grew back eventually. He wore them differently after. Kept his mouth closed. Avoided mirrors. Ania Frey walked out of the French Quarter and boarded a bus heading west. She carried nothing, owned nothing, needed nothing. The name she'd spoken lived in her chest, a coal that never cooled, a reminder that some powers didn't belong to those who wielded them. The source didn't speak again, didn't need to. The message had landed, in New Orleans and beyond, in every hidden court and secret haven, in every place where the dead pretended to be gods. The story spread, whispered at first, then spoken plainly. There were rules. There had always been rules, and something older than memory was watching to ensure they were followed. The vampires of the world adjusted, became smaller, quieter, careful. They remembered what they'd spent centuries trying to forget. That immortality was a gift that could be revoked. That power was borrowed, not owned. That somewhere in the darkness, something far older than them moved with purpose and will. And that, when it sent a messenger, you listened, or you learned what it meant to truly die. That's how empires fall, not with war, but with a single word. Subscribe for more stories where power meets its origin, like if this landed the way it should. Comment. Who do you think created the source? The architecture of true authority. There's a peculiar kind of confidence that comes from never being challenged. We see it in corporate hierarchies, in family systems, in social dynamics where someone has operated without meaningful resistance for so long, they begin to believe their position is natural law rather than circumstantial arrangement. This story isn't really about vampires. It's about what happens when assumed authority meets actual authority, and the psychological collapse that follows. Real power operates quietly. It doesn't announce itself through displays or performance. It simply exists, recognized by those who understand the deeper structures at play. When Ania stood in that ballroom, her power came not from physical strength or supernatural ability, but from representing something the vampires had forgotten existed, the origin point of their own power structure. This is true in every hierarchy. The moment you forget where your authority comes from, you've already begun to lose it. The vampires' mistake was common. They confused the exercise of power with the ownership of power. Because they'd been allowed to operate unchecked, they assumed they operated by right rather than by permission. This happens in businesses when middle management forgets they serve at the pleasure of ownership. It happens in governments when officials forget they derive authority from consent. It happens in relationships when one party assumes their position is permanent rather than maintained. The psychological impact of sudden power inversion is profound. When your entire identity is built on being apex, discovering you're merely provisional creates a collapse that goes beyond fear into existential crisis. The vampires didn't just face physical danger, they faced the annihilation of their self-concept. This is why Liam's response wasn't rage, but paralysis. His worldview had to rebuild from scratch. For those of us navigating human hierarchies, the lesson is straightforward. Humility isn't weakness, it's accurate perception. Understanding that your position exists within a larger system, that your authority is contextual rather than absolute, isn't limiting. It's liberating. It allows you to operate with appropriate caution, to maintain the relationships and structures that grant you influence, and to avoid the catastrophic mistakes that come from believing your own mythology. The source in this story represents any power structure you've forgotten exists above you. Market forces, legal systems, social consequences, or simply the basic physics of human relationships. Ignore them long enough, and eventually they send a reminder. The question is whether you're wise enough to listen before the reminder becomes correction.